Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for your interest in the Pennsylvania's Faithful Fund and for joining us today. My name is Emily Sajdak, and I am Director of Rural Initiatives with an organization called Partners for Sacred Places. Partners for Sacred Places is a national nonprofit organization that's focused on building the capacity of congregations and communities to help them preserve and make the most of historic sacred places. So we help faith communities better serve their towns and neighborhoods and transform their spaces for the future. Um, and I have a colleague here with me as well. Maddie, I'll let you jump in and introduce yourself real quick as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Maddie. I'm a development associate here at Partners, and I'm just playing a support role today for Emily. But it's exciting to see all of y'all.
Great, thanks. Um, Maddie and I, and mainly me, will be your contact for all things in regard to this grant program. So both during the application process and after, if you're selected for funding. So we're planning on spending about 40 minutes today, walking through some slides, talking about the program, and we're going to try to leave a good chunk of time for larger questions about the program, as well as maybe some more project-specific questions that you all have. We'll have an overview of the program and eligibility, and then spend a little time looking briefly at the Foundant platform and how you'll log in and get into the application there. We will break sort of in the middle in chunks of content for some questions. So during that time, please feel free to raise your hand or drop any questions in the chat, and Maddie and I will do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the session. But also, please, feel free to reach out afterwards by phone or by email. I'll show you my contact information and we can chat afterwards as well. We are recording this session and it's going to be available on Partners for Sacred Places YouTube account. And we'll share a PDF of the slides also for those who are registered. So hopefully knowing that that information is coming along, I can sit back and take in the content now and ask questions as we go along. Uh, Quick little overview about this funding. The program comes from the historic preservation funds that are available. It was created in 2018. Grants come from the Historic Preservation Fund that is administered by the National Park Service. So this is federal funding that's awarded out to first Partners for Sacred Places as a grantee. And then we in turn award that funding out to sub-grantees, which could be some of you all in this room. And the goal of the funding here is to support historic preservation projects that provide community and economic development opportunities. So that's the goal of the larger funding. And so that's also a driver of how we're going to select our grantees for the program as well. Quick overview here on the timeline. So the big deadline you'll see there first in bold is December 10. December 10 is the deadline to the Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation Office to submit a National Register determination of eligibility. So this is important for you to remember if you are not currently listed on the National Register for Sacred Places or eligible or determined eligible for the National Register. So if you are not already listed, you will need to submit a form that I'll show you a little bit about in a minute. You'll need to submit that form to the State Historic Preservation Office to be determined eligible. And if you're not sure whether you're eligible or not, there's some easy ways to check. And you can reach out to us and we can help you figure out how to best get that information that you need. After the determination of eligibility deadline, the application to the program is due on January 9. So end of day, it's set for midnight if you want to work on it that long. End of day, January 9 is when the application itself is due. After the application is due, we'll have a review panel that will meet in January to select projects. Partners will also do something that we call a risk assessment. This is just something that's required as part of federal funding. And once we're confident that the projects that we've selected will be approved, we'll send them to the National Park Service for their approval. And then in March, we plan to notify everyone about their status. Once applicants are accepted into the program, they'll enter a review process that's also required of federally funded projects, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then while that review process is happening, we will also host a training for participating organizations focused on helping participants in the program tell their story, think about fundraising, and use their facilities to better serve the community. And then once that review process that I mentioned that's required of these federally funded projects has completed, your construction projects could begin at that time. Also, some basic eligibility criteria that you all should be aware of. So projects should be located in a town of 750,000 people or fewer. And so this is going to be according to the most recent US Census data as well, which I think was in 2020. So you can go check the census data. We have that linked on our website. And then you also should confirm that you are outside any urban areas that are designated by the US Department of Agriculture for rural business programs. Um, as noted, buildings should be determined eligible for listing or be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And all work should be completed to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, which we will also talk about in a little bit in more detail. The other thing that you should all be aware of is that owners of properties should be willing to accept a term easement. Again, we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but that's something that's required of federal funding. And projects should be on track to be completed by June 2027. Again, noting here that determination of eligibility deadline is important if you are not already listed on or eligible for the National Register. Buildings that are listed as eligible for the National Register and are accepted into the program will need to be listed on the National Register by the end of the program. The good news is that Partners does have some funds set aside on the administrative side of this grant to be able to help organizations with the process of becoming listed. So if we accept you into the program and you are eligible but not listed, we will work with you to find someone who can help you complete the National Register process. And if you have a mortgage or a lien on the building or property, to go back to that piece about the easement, we will request a letter from the mortgage holder acknowledging that they accept the terms of that easement. Here's a little peek at some of the determination of eligibility information. So if you need to complete a determination of eligibility, you'll submit some basic property information and information about the significance of the building so that National Register reviewers at the State Historic Preservation Office have enough information to assess whether your building is eligible. And so here are some of the initial steps as to how you would go about logging in and filling out that determination of eligibility. What's in bold here is very important, and that's why there's a deadline of December 10 for this. The SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, needs 30 days to be able to fully complete that review process. So in order for you to have that determination of letter in hand to submit for your application, you need to submit that a month in advance of the application deadline. So you'll have that in hand to submit when you're ready. We do recognize that many of you are lay people who probably have never done this, and this, may be the first time that you're doing it. So we are here to help answer questions that you may have about the process and to point you in the direction of the people on staff at the State Historic Preservation Office who can help answer any questions. So you're really in this determination of eligibility process, you're really just sort of taking a step back, looking at your building and doing your best to document and show that historical, architectural, cultural significance so that the reviewers can see see who you are and what the building is.
If I could just jump in really quickly,
Yeah,
Emily, I
of
also want to
course.
note that if you received a letter from us in the mail or got the PA Faithful Fund email blast, most of you are going to be already eligible. That was sent out to folks that we already identified as eligible. So it's important to check your eligibility, but if you're in this room right now, most likely you're either eligible or already listed.
Yes, that is a great point. Thank you, Maddie, for jumping in that. All right, a little more about this easement. So an easement, a preservation easement, is really a legal agreement that's put in place to protect the investment in the building. And so it exists to ensure that the work that's completed during this process is protected. And it's a way of helping to ensure that the characteristics of the building that make it unique and special remain there for the future. It is a requirement of grants that are made from the National Park Service's Historic Preservation Fund that this term easement be put in place. So it's a term easement, it's not forever, it's a number of years, and that term is linked to the amount of funding that you request and receive. So if you request $50,000 from this program, that easement term is 5 years. And if you request $100,000, that term is 10 years. I'll also point out that if we are funding work on the interior, it's possible that the easement may extend to the interior as well, or if your interior is really significant to the importance of your building, it may be possible that that easement needs to protect interior features as well as exterior. Um, the easement, though, really is a partnership between Preservation Pennsylvania, who's going to hold these easements, and the owner of the property. So all work beyond regular maintenance will need to be approved, but please know that partners and Preservation Pennsylvania are really here to make this an easy process, and we want it to be a partnership between organizations to help ensure the future of your building. I will say I have gotten a number of questions from people already about how to indicate your status on the application. Your options are that you already have an easement with Preservation Pennsylvania, you're in a pending easement with Preservation Pennsylvania, or I think we've called it Bruin term easement. And so if you do not have an easement currently with Preservation Pennsylvania and you plan to just accept the term easement of 5 to 10 years, when you're in that application, click the Bruin term easement option. We can answer big picture easement questions here in this session if you have those. If you have more project specific questions related to the easement, I would recommend that you reach out to me by email or phone, and I can also put you in touch with Mindy at Preservation Pennsylvania to discuss further. This is a requirement of the funder, though, so it's not something that we have wiggle room on. If you accept the funding, you'll sign to the easement early on, and the recording will actually happen at the end. So the easement doesn't actually take place until after the work on the building is completed. But if for some reason the easement doesn't go through, we wouldn't be able to distribute that funding. So we're really wanting to be upfront and aware that groups who are applying understand what an easement means and are on board early in the process. Last but not least, before we take a few questions, we'll talk a little bit about eligible activities. So we want to be as broad as we can with what the funding can pay for. But the funding does come from traditional preservation sources. It's coming from the National Park Service, which is the federal entity that works on preservation. So with this funding, we are interested in what you could generally consider more traditional preservation projects. So windows, exterior work, but we also like to ensure the usability of a building. So things like code compliance, weatherization, insulation, some of those things can also be eligible activities as well. So it's, the project is excited about accomplishing preservation goals, but also with a mind to making the building usable for modern life as well. All right, we'll pause for questions if there are any. So Feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask your question verbally, or if you have dropped something in the chat, Maddie, you can let me know what we have going on.
Yeah, Robert, you can start us off.
Cool. Just a quick question. Want to clarify that I heard you correctly. If we are not currently on the National Historic Registry, though we're looking to
Mhm.
get there, okay?
Yeah.
I'm new at my post, so I've got a lot of backlogged homework that we have to do on our property. But as I understood it, you said so long as there is a submission of determine eligibility by the 10th, even if we're not technically on the registry now, as long as we're determined to be eligible, we should be good. Uh, and did I correctly hear Madison say, hey, if you got our invite, you're most likely good? Because we got your invite, and in fact, there's been someone from your office that actually called us with a follow-up. Millie, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you, to reiterate Maddie's point, if you received a phone call or an email from myself or Maddie or Lily, or you received a letter in the mail from partners, you most likely are already determined eligible, but it's probably worth still confirming with the State Historic Preservation Office, which is housed at the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. It's probably worth confirming because sometimes if it's been more than 5 or so years that that determination was made, you may need to do something to just, show the current state of your building or something like that so that they can confirm that nothing has changed and you would still be eligible. But if you were reached out to by us, likely you've completed this step already. If you have not done that determination of eligibility, you need to have that information from that screen that I shared with that document. It's like a 4-page document of the things that you'll need to supply. You'll need to put that together and submit it to the State Historic Preservation Office by December 10 for their review. Because for our application, you need to have a letter in hand from the State Historic Preservation Office saying that they have determined you eligible, and the State Historic Preservation Office needs 30 days to do that. So if you need to submit all that so that they can have the 30 days to do that review to get you the letter that you'll add as an attachment to your application.
Very
And
cool.
Robert, you're from Brandywine Baptist, right?
Yes.
Okay. Our files have you listed as currently eligible. So you're not
Cool.
on the register, but you already have that determination of eligibility. I'll check after this Zoom meeting to make sure that that is to confirm with the actual database. And I'll shoot you an email if you're actually not eligible or listed as eligible, but it seems as though you are, so you shouldn't have to worry about this.
That'd be great. So if I get that determination from you, then we don't have to stress the deadline by the 10th. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. Yeah. If you
Cool.
are already determined eligible, you don't need to be concerned about the December 10th deadline.
Super.
You only need
Thank
to
you.
be concerned about that deadline if you are not already in the State Historic Preservation Office or the SHPO's record.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you big time.
Of course.
Ed, do you want to go next? Oh, Ed, it seems you're muted. If you could unmute. Here, one sec. All right, we should be able to hear you now, Ed.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, you're unmuted, but it seems like your microphone isn't working.
Yeah, we still can't hear you. So if you want to keep working on that, or if you want to drop a question in the chat, we can get to that in just a second and maybe take someone else's question while we wait, but we won't forget about you, Ed.
Does anyone have a question in the meantime while we're waiting for Ed to drop one in the chat? Norman?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
hear you.
Um, I'm from Paxton Presbyterian Church, which is outside of Harrisburg. So our church was built in 1740. My question is, since we're in Paxton, but it's on the outskirts of the city of Harrisburg, you had listed about 7,500, I think, since it's more for rural. Are we out because we're too close to the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I would do in your position, because you need to be outside those urban areas that are designated by the Department of Agriculture, and we have this linked on our website. So if you go to sacredplaces.org, um, near the top, it says Pennsylvania's Faithful Fund accepting applicants. And we have links to, I believe, both the census data and to that piece of information from the Department of Agriculture that you need to assess whether or not you would be in an urban area. So I would recommend that you take your zip code and your information and go to that Department of Agriculture site and see what it says. And if it says that you are in a rural area, then you're good to go. And if it says that you're in an urban area, then this funding may not be a good
Okay.
fit.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And both of those links are in the chat right now. For what it's worth, we do have you at least listed as eligible for the National Historic uh, Preservation Database, but you should check the urban still. And then Emily, Ed in the chat asked,
Mhm.
how long should the history section of the application uh, be in terms of number of words, and what are the most important points?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what we put as the term limit, but it is something that we're going to discuss here a little bit in the slides that come, um, that are coming after this. I would say, probably a couple of paragraphs. And again, we'll highlight this in just a second, but a couple of paragraphs talking about your historical significance and why it's important to preserve your space. Everybody's story is going to be different. But really what we're looking to hear is, what makes your building historically, culturally, and architecturally special. Great question. Anything else, Maddie, or we'll just move right along and we'll have more opportunity for questions in a little bit.
Yeah, it seems like it might be a good moment to move along, and then I'm sure there'll be more questions later.
All right. So brief, quick eligibility requirements checklist that's important here. So here are many of the questions that cover that basic eligibility criteria. So if you are planning to submit your application, the answer to the questions that are listed here should be what's indicated, which in most cases is a yes, but the last question is a no. We are happy to answer questions about eligibility again, either in this session or if you want to call or email. And if you'd like to get a look at the application questions before you log on and get ready to submit that way, those are also linked on our website. And I have a screenshot of that here in a little bit too, that just show you where you can find that. And Maddie, you could drop it in the chat if you have it too. But you can get a look at the application questions before you go into the Foundant system. If your question is something that's other than what's indicated here on this slide, this funding may not be the best fit for your project, but if you have a situation that you want to discuss with us, we are more than happy to talk with you about it and see where you would fit. All of our selection criteria that we score is also listed on that website in that same section. Again, I'll show you where that's linked. And we encourage you to review that as well. Some people find it helpful to look at that and sort of self-score and self-weigh how you believe you may stand up as we're considering your application. You know, we want to be as transparent as possible with all of you as we're making these funding decisions. So we're, you know, here's a little bit on the slide here, and would encourage you to go look at that selection criteria as you think about how best to frame that application. All right, and here's that website. So once you get to the web page and you scroll down on that Pennsylvania's Faithful Fund site, that second question there that's listed here, what is involved in the application, links you to an extensive grant guidelines document. You can preview the application. The criteria is there, the budget form, all of those sorts of things if you want to get a sense of what's required before you would log into the platform. We use a platform called Fountain for this. And so if you're on this page, you scroll down a little bit, it'll say apply now. If you click that apply now, it'll take you to Fountain. And this is the screen that you'll see when you get there. And so I've circled it here. What you will do if you've never been in this platform before is you will create a new account. So it'll ask you for contact information, you know, the name of your church or organization, all of those sorts of things to create that profile. And once you have that profile created and you log in, you'll see a page that looks like this. And so what you want here, you want Pennsylvania's Faithful Fund, Paul Brune, HPF 2025 to 2027. This is another opportunity here where you can click, if you click that preview button, you can preview the application before you go in and start an application. So you can preview it, but if you hit apply, then it'll take you in to start that application process. Once you're in, what you'll see is here. And so the application follows. You can save this. So if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll have an option to save, so you don't have to do all of this in one sitting. Some people like to do the application in Word or some other platform and then copy and paste in. You can do it that way. You can also save as you go along within the Fountain platform. But the other thing that I'd like to point out is that in the upper right-hand corner, there's a button that says collaborate. So whoever goes in and logs in for the first time is going to be like the primary applicant in this case and situation, but you can add additional people when you click on that collaborate button if you want to be able to work on it concurrently with someone else. So you can work on it collaboratively, which I think is really, really great. All right, and here we're going to go over a little bit about some of the sections that we are particularly interested when you get into the application. So historic, cultural, architectural significance is an important piece of this program, of the application. As indicated, you know, by the National Register status and that piece. So what we are looking for in this section with these questions is, you know, what is historically significant about your building? Is it locally significant? Is it on the National Register? Why is this building important to preserve? Every project is going to look a little different or a lot different because everybody's building and everybody's story is different. But what we're really looking for in this section, in this couple of paragraphs, is what makes your building, what makes your congregation or your historic congregation, what makes your particular situation unique and special. We also want to know about what is important about this building to the community. So what is special about it from the community standpoint? How do they currently use it? How will this project help them use it more effectively? How will it enhance the lives of future generations? Is this a transformational project for the community? This is really your space to talk about that community impact. As a preservation grant, this is really one of the primary places that we are looking for information from you with the project scope and description of your planned work. We want to know how you identified the issues that you hope to address with this funding, and we want to know how this work is going to align with preservation standards. And I think one of the really important reminders here is that work on the Paul Brun grant. So Paul Brun grant, Pennsylvania's Faithful Fund, same thing. Work for the Paul Brun grant, as well as any other work that's happening concurrently with the work that's planned with this funding, needs to meet this standards. Needs to meet these standards. So the Park Service, the State Historic Preservation Office, partners, we're going to look at the total impact on the building of what we're funding while it's happening, not just the portion of the work that's being funded. So geeking out a little bit about preservation here for a second, there are 4 broad sets of standards, but the standards for rehabilitation, the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, are the ones that we focus on with this grant because they are what help preserve the building, while realizing that often some changes need to be made to the historic structure to make it so that this building is usable and modern, to modern standards, and it can continue to be loved and used in, in modern society. So that's where code compliance, ADA accessibility, projects like that, all can fit within these standards and operate with their guidance. There are 10 standards. We're not going to read them here, but we can distribute them later for more information. I would encourage you to talk with us, but also, read them, familiarize yourself with them as you're working on your application so that you can show us how that planned work really fits within potential recommended treatment options for preservation projects. The level of planning that you would be considering for whatever project you are submitting for is going to be related to the complexity of your project. So if you're doing a foundation project, for example, clear photos of the foundation in its current state, a bid from a contractor who has familiarity with historic materials, as well as showing that you have a sense for what these standards might require, are really helpful for us in the review committee when we're reviewing your project to show that you understand the requirements and have started, putting in that effort to take steps in that planning process. Again, we realize that, many of you may have not done this at all before. You don't have to be experts in the field for this. So we are here really to be a resource to you and to answer questions as you, put your plans together. All right, we're going to pause for more questions if any of you have them.
We have one question from Cheryl in the chat.
All right.
She asked what types of photos are most desirable, areas that require repair/restoration, question mark, and then is there a limit on the number of photos?
Yes, there is a limit on the number of photos. I believe, I'm not looking at it right now, but I believe the application has 5. I think we request an exterior and interior. And then it's really helpful to have, and again, it's going to depend on the type of project that you are submitting for, but to have clear photos of the area that you are proposing work for this project on. So if it's the foundation, we want to see the stone, we want to see what's happening, or, it may not be stone, whatever your foundation material is made of, we want to see that foundation in its current state to give us a sense of, why this project is needed and what this funding is going to do. So more of, like a broader exterior, a broader interior, and then more detailed images from whichever part of the building is your focus on this application. But I think the limit is 5. But I would send you to the application to confirm, but I think the limit is 5.
The limit is 5.
Thanks, Maddie.
All right, Robert, do you want to ask a question?
Yep, it was a few slides back. You had listed, use of funds, X, Y, and Z, right? I had seen that slide before, and much of which we're looking to do. But one of the other things is we had a question about is on our property is the because we're the church on the battlefield of the Battle of Brandywine, Revolutionary War, and our property has the Revolutionary War cemetery, so we have Revolutionary War soldiers in there and so forth, and it needs work. So I just specifically didn't see grounds or
Mhm.
cemetery, in your itemization. So would that be something that we should submit for as well?
Yeah, that is a great question. And it also reminds me of something else that I'll indicate. This funding is specific to the building, the built
Building.
environment. So
Okay.
cemeteries would not be a part of this, but you raise a point to go back to my point about foundations. And I'll indicate this a little bit in some of my wrap up, at the end as reminders about federal funding. But some
Okay.
of the review that needs to take place is environmental and historical review. So if you are proposing, and again, we will work with you through that process should you be admitted. So don't be scared. Um, if if you're submitting for a project like a foundation, you may be dealing, then with the ground area around and outside. And I just remembered this because you're talking about a cemetery. So as part of that review, some of that is archaeological as well. So, you'll look at any disturbances that could happen around and impacts to that area as well. So as you're thinking about the project that you might propose, you'll want to be thinking about that review process. So,
Awesome.
um, you that review may be building, but if it's something like a foundation where you're going to be sort of in that area right around the building as well,
Yeah.
you may be looking at the ground as well.
Okay. And then one more thing, because again, a lot of the other stuff is pretty understandable. Roof, windows, so forth, upgrades, modernization of the building.
Mhm.
But we do tours in conjunction with the Battlefield Visitor Center, but we're always open to the public. So people come
Mhm.
onto our property morning, noon, and night. And we wanted a safer environment by way of exterior lighting.
Mm.
So in a sense, it'd be attached to the building, but then there would be some ground lighting as well. Because again, we get nonstop traffic on our property,
Mhm.
and it's just areas are very, very dark. So that would amplify the community experience, which was one of your key points. So would that
Mhm.
be a qualifying project?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I don't know the answer right off the top of my head. So what I would request is that you send me, and I'll put my, email and phone number and things at the end. Send me an email about that or give me a phone call and we will chat outside of this
Cool.
webinar about that.
Super.
All right. Dr. Cheryl asked another quick question.
Yeah.
Can the application proceed without detailed contractor bids, and will estimates suffice? She also gave the context that their church has an 1890s roof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, estimates are should suffice for this step. And this will be in my reminders towards the end as well. The thing to keep in mind is that this will need to be a competitive bid process as well. So we will want you to get multiple bids. But estimates should be sufficient in this case to show at this application stage to show, total project costs and some of those things to help you plan out fundraising and costs and all of that sort of thing. So at this stage, estimates should be fine, but know that you will be doing a competitive bid process as part of this grant as well.
Norman, you had a question?
I did. He just reminded me with cemetery. Our churchyard is probably about 15 to 20 feet away from the corner of the church itself. It has a stone wall around it from circa about 1790. Um, and there is some areas that the wall itself is bending or coming apart. So now you did talk about that. And you also would something like ground penetrating radar be something that could be used uh, and put in for this? Because we have areas that we know people are buried there, but we don't know where or uh, in what way they are.
Sure. Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. The cemetery work would would be falling outside of
Okay.
the scope of this funding. So we're focused, in particular about the
Right.
building. It's
Mhm.
possible that, as part of the review process, depending on what you're proposing as your project, um, that ground penetrating radar or something like that may be, part of what's needed as part of the review process.
Mhm.
But the wall and work to be done in the cemetery would be outside the framework of
Okay.
the grant.
All right. Thank you.
Of course. Other questions?
Eric, I know you joined a little bit late, so I also just wanted to mention that we'll be sending the full recording out to everyone after the Zoom ends as well. So you'll get the stuff you missed eventually.
All right. I'm gonna do the couple of things, reminders and those sorts of things now, and then we can stay on to chat after, we wrap some of this up, to answer any more questions that you all have. And again, feel free to reach out, but we'll just do a couple brief reminders here about the timeline and where we are. So again, that determination of eligibility deadline is coming up. If you are not already listed on or eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, you need to get that determination of eligibility information to the Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation Office, by December 10, so that they have time to review and you can have a letter in hand, to submit to us with your application, which is due in January, due at the end of the day on January 9. And then we will, go through this review process, the risk assessment, all of that, and planning on announcing funding decisions in March. When applications are due, when that January 9 deadline comes, we're going to do a quick review for completeness. If it looks like there's an issue with an upload or something, minor like that, we're going to follow up with you to make sure that everything is in place. So that way we can ensure that everything is in order when we take it to the review committee. The one thing that we can't really follow up on or have any wiggle room around is that piece about the easement. So if you have questions about it, anything like that, please reach out and we can chat about it. But that's the one piece, signing on to that legal agreement is a requirement of the grant. So important to be aware of. And then some of you broadly, may have worked with federal funding previously, but I'm assuming many of you may be less familiar. As you may have seen through this session, there are a lot of complexities to federal funding. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you about any of those things. One of the really helpful things about the way that this grant funding is set up in particular is that we, as Partners for Sacred Places, are really a partner with you in this process. So it's not going to fall fully to you to do this work by yourselves. We're here to help guide you through, how this process works. Here at the top, if you do not already have a unique identity and unique identity identifier, a UEI, you need to obtain one. This is a requirement for organizations that do business with the federal government. It is free to have, so it's not going to cost you anything to get one, but you are required to have one to receive money as from grants from the federal government. So you will need to have one of those in hand. SAM.gov is where you get one, and that's linked to our website as well, so we can help point you in the direction to do that. You will need to complete, as I said, National Environmental Policy Act review that takes into consideration any project impact on the environment, as well as something called Section 106 review, which is focused on impact to historical, cultural, architectural resources. Again, this is another point where we are going to work with you to ensure that you complete this process. But again, small quick note that you can't start work on any construction until after this review process is completed. So all construction work will happen after you're in the program and accepted, and after we've gone through the whole review process. You also need to follow federal procurement requirements, and there's more information about this in the grant guidelines. Um, this is the point that I made about competitive bids. So for projects that are federally funded that are less than $250,000, which I think will probably be most applications in this case, there's a lower bar for this, but it still involves getting competitive bids for work. Some of those sorts of points laid out in our grant guidelines. It's laid out in federal statutes. If you want to go read it there, we've linked to them. But again, one of the primary points here being that this process needs to be open and competitive. This is also a reimbursement grant program, which means that you need to incur expenses before we can pay grant funds out. If you look on the left here, I've pulled some of the information from our grant guidelines. So you'll see that there are percentage points along the way, but it's important to keep this in mind as you're thinking about project timelines and cash flow. So know that we can help and give you money as you work through the grant, but none of that money isn't fronted. So you need a way to sort of engineer the cash flow, because we won't be able to pay out the full amount of the grant until the very end. We as partners have a direct relationship with the National Park Service as a prime grantee, and we have a relationship with those who are admitted as subgrantees to help them navigate through the projects and process. As noted, there are rules and responsibilities that are required as part of this process, but we are here to help you walk through them. Those requirements are pretty well laid out in the grant guidelines document on the website. So again, I'll point you there, sort of read through in more detail, but I'm always happy to have a conversation with you all about any more specifics. And so as promised, here's my contact information, my email, and ways that you can follow partners as well. And we can sit here for a little while and answer some more questions, or please feel free to follow up as well.
Seems like Robert has a question. Yeah.
I'm always the question guy in these things. So
yeah, I love it.
ADA upgrades, right?
Mhm.
Which is also something on our docket. I apologize, my phone is ringing. My dental office, but no soup for them. Okay, so we have 1 second. I'll turn this off. Sorry, y'all.
I can't hear it, so you're
Oh,
fine.
you can't hear it? Okay, good.
Nope.
We have our ADA, our ramp basically
Mhm.
needs work. It needs to be torn down and rebuilt, in my honest opinion. So, but again, that's attached to the building. It's not an issue inside the building.
Mhm.
So does that count?
Yeah, accessibility upgrades for
Good.
access to the building. Yeah. Mhm.
Very cool. Okay, that's good because again, I'm a literal interpretist, so I just wanted to make sure I got her,
Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So just keeping in mind that work will need to be done to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. So assuming that ramp is not original to the building, there may be some negotiation as to how that
Yeah.
all happens to fit the standards, but yes, it would be within the frame
That's
of.
fine. It's not
Mhm.
original, and anything is an improvement with what's there, to be honest with you. So
Great. Thank you for your question. Anyone else? Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking of specific things. What about air conditioning? Like, if we have to replace air conditioning, how
Mhm.
does that fit? Or
Yeah,
does it fit? Or do they have that first?
that's a great question. That could fit, yes, as part of, code compliance and some of those sorts of uh, weatherization, some of those sorts of pieces. But I would also recommend, reach out to me and we can have a chat about your specific
Okay.
situation and ensure that that is something that in your case
Okay.
would be in keeping. Mhm.
Oh,
How about kitchen remodeling?
I think that kitchens, I mean, we can chat and you can make your case and we can talk about it. I would say that kitchens may be less, um, the more, so some of this also, getting down to the difference between eligible and competitive as well.
Right.
So the most competitive projects are going to be those that are focused, because again, remembering that this funding is coming from the Historic Preservation Fund through the National Park Service, which is one of the more traditional preservation funding sources available. The more that you can focus your work on the, historic, cultural, architecturally significant features of the
Yeah.
building, the more competitive your application is going to be.
Because it looks like there's a balance between, you know, amplified use with the community and then
Mhm.
preservation of the structure, right?
Mhm.
Because, for
Mhm.
example, we freely give away our space to like the Chadsford Women's Group, Daughters of the Revolution, Boy Scouts, I mean, I can go on and on and on. They can
Yep.
just use our building anytime free of charge. And
Yep.
often, as a blessing, we like to offer them, the food.
Mhm.
And but our kitchen is bad. So anyway, but I get there's a balance between, all right, the
Mhm.
structure and then the community amplification, right?
Yep.
So is it
Yep.
better to weigh your submission structure building as opposed to community amplification? Because that is thematic in your PowerPoint there.
It is. It is for sure. And it's, thematic to what we do as partners as an
Yeah,
organization too. So I'm smiling,
yeah,
I'm smiling. This is something that we hear all the time.
yeah,
Um, I would say, particularly when you have issue or projects in mind that have to do with like water infiltration and the roof and the foundation, those can be, it's a both and
yeah,
situation, right? Because if you
yeah,
have, it's not something where, it's not an oven that you're using, actively to provide that food, but if you have coming into your
yeah,
building, or it's, you can't keep the heat, all the heat is leaking, all those sorts of considerations, then your building is, much less hospitable for the people who do want to use your space.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so it is a bit of a balancing act, but keeping in mind both the community piece of things, but also the fact that this is a traditional preservation funding source that's going to be
yeah,
interested in, um, that the building
yeah,
itself,
yeah.
is going to help make your application more competitive. And again, I'm happy to have a chat with you outside of this webinar too, if you want to talk about specifics of how to make this more competitive.
Super. Thank you.
Mhm. Other questions? Yeah, Eric. Yeah.
There we go. Emily, we completed the interior renovations about over the last 2 years, replastering, painting, and we're ready to move to the outside. And
Mhm.
we've got bids, but we won't start until we plan on starting in the summer.
Mhm.
Um, and you mentioned that $250,000 mark.
Mhm.
We're right now that outside work is about 100,000, but we're also looking at the stained glass, and I'm sure a lot of people know when you get into stained glass, um, your bids go through the roof.
Yeah.
When we submit, we could do that in phases. Would it be better to stay under that $200,000 or $250,000 threshold when we do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm making a mental note to myself to reach out to you about that specifically because I want to double
Okay.
check something in regard
Okay.
to how the program operates and whether anything that's being done. Because as I noted, any work that you're doing over the course of this period while this Bruin grant, this Pennsylvania's Faithful Fund grant is operating, all of that needs to be done with the Secretary of Interior standards. But I am not remembering in this moment whether the federal procurement guidelines would apply in both cases as well. And so
Okay.
I want to confirm that before I say one thing one way or the other in your particular instance. Um, and you can look at so we have it linked through the grant guidelines as well. So you can look at those
Okay.
federal procurement guidelines yourself. The main point is that, there's more, it's a lower bar for the competitive bids and pieces and things that come if you stay
Okay.
under that 250 than if you go over. But I want to confirm whether that's, something that applies for both the work that you're doing and work that would be outside in the way that the Secretary of Interior Standards of Rehabilitation does, or not. So I'm making myself a note to follow up with you about that. I'll double check it after we get off here.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Other questions? All right. Seeing none, I think we can wrap up. Um, Thank you again for joining today. Really excited about all of your interest. Uh, Please feel free to follow up with me by email. My email is all over most things, so the website, all those sorts of places, and I had linked it in the slides, and we will distribute all of that to you as well after this webinar. So you should have a way to get in touch with me from now until the January 9th deadline, and I'm looking forward to having conversations with you all. But yes, thank you. Thank you again for joining, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
You.